All right, so you've sent in some seriously interesting stuff this time around, and it all kind of circles back to this question, like, what if money just poof, disappeared? Or what if, like, it's always been kind of like a big illusion?
Trippy.
Grippy, right?
Yeah, for sure. It really gets you thinking about something that's, so deeply woven into everything we do every day. We rarely stop to question it.
Totally. And that's what we're diving into today, folks. Money. Where would it even come from? How to get so powerful? And then this crazy thought, could we even function without it? You've sent us everything from a video that like lays out this whole illusion thing to some pretty wild imaginings of what a moneyless society could actually look like.
Exactly. We've got like the historical side of money, its evolution, and then this more philosophical what if kind of exploration.
And for our listeners, this is all about getting a brand new perspective on something we're so used to, right? Hopefully some light bulb moments along the way, and who knows, maybe even some surprising possibilities about life beyond the dollar bill. Our mission today, to really unpack those core ideas from all the awesome stuff you've sent our way. So, to kick things off, let's tackle this illusion of money thing head on.
Right. One of the things that jumps out from that Aperture video is how, money today isn't really a thing
Hmm.
in the same way that like a hammer is a thing. It's more like a shared understanding, a concept we all agree on.
Oh, yeah, the video starts off by asking, what's humanity's greatest invention? And they make a pretty strong case for money, even though, like, you can't really hold it in your hand like you can, say, a wheel or fire.
Totally. And then they do this great job of contrasting that with the barter system, which, was the original way humans swapped stuff. But man, was it ever clumsy.
Yeah, like imagine trying to trade your cow for a few carrots and the carrot farmer's like, I don't need a whole cow right now. Or, you've got a tent and you're trying to get a pair of shoes for it. That just feels so lopsided.
Exactly. It's like
Huh?
uneven, right? The video calls that the asymmetry problem. And then there's this whole double coincidence of wants thing, which is just a fancy way of saying you need to find someone who not only wants what you have, but also has what you want at the same time. Yikes.
Talk about a logistical nightmare. So then along comes money as this, like, store value, right?
Yeah.
The example in the video with the tent maker and the tomato farmer really highlights this perfectly.
Oh, yeah, the tent maker can hold on to his wealth in the form of tents. They last, right? But the tomato farmer, well, those tomatoes have a very limited shelf life. Money gives you a way to hold on to that value no matter how perishable the original goods might be.
And then we start seeing these early forms of what they call commodity money. Basically, things pretty much everyone agreed were valuable.
Yeah.
Weapons, animal skins, salt, even, get this, not bees.
I know, right? Can you imagine? But it makes sense. These things became mediums of exchange because they were widely accepted and, well, they had some kind of use or desirability. And that, kind of naturally led to the idea of using arbitrary placeholders of value, like those early IOUs, basically promises to pay.
Makes total sense. Instead of lugging around like a sack of salt, you could just have a little note saying, hey, this guy owes me a sack of salt. It's like taking a step towards abstracting the whole concept of value.
Then the Aperture video takes us to China, around 770 BC, and the first metal coins. Initially, these weren't just symbolic, right? Like a bronze coin was made of bronze.
Yeah, it wasn't just representing value, it had that value in the metal itself. But, wherever you find power.
Things can get a little messy, right?
Yeah.
The video talks about King Alyattes of Lydia, around 600 BC. He started minting coins, but he was mixing in less valuable metals with the good stuff. And get this,
Yeah.
he put a stamp on them saying what they were worth. And this is huge.
It's like all of a sudden, what the coin is said to be worth, its face value, isn't necessarily what that lump of metal is actually worth, right? Bam. The illusion is born.
Exactly. Rulers could debase the coins, basically sneak in more and more cheap metal and create more money without actually having more valuable resources. The value started being tied to the stamp, to whoever was issuing it, rather than to the actual material itself.
And that eventually lays the groundwork for paper IOUs, for trading across long distances. Over time, people start trusting these pieces of paper, even without physically trading them back for gold or silver or whatever. And that, my friend, is fiat currency in a nutshell.
You got it. That definition from the video, fiat meaning let it be done, is so spot on. It's like a government decree saying, hey, this piece of paper, it's valuable, legal tender. Think about that 10,000 Singapore dollar note they showed. Just a piece of paper, but it represents like a crazy amount of perceived value because we all agree it does, and the government backs it up.
And this whole power to just create money out of thin air, well, it has some pretty big consequences, like hello, inflation.
Right. The video does a great job explaining how printing more money than there are actual goods and services to buy just makes the existing money worth less. Think about all that US dollar printing in 2020.
I know. The sheer amount was mind-blowing, and you saw it in the rising prices for everything, like lumber going up or even like a few extra cents for guac at your favorite taco place. Little things, but they add up.
Oh, for sure. And there's this subtle point they make. New money steals value from old money. Even if the number in your account stays the same, its buying power shrinks because there's more money chasing the same amount of stuff.
It's like a sneaky tax almost,
Yeah.
right? And then the video mentions the U.S. national debt and treasury bonds, which are basically just government IOUs. It can feel a bit overwhelming, but the main takeaway is pretty clear. Fiat currency, by its very nature, can lose value over time.
And tying that all back to the big picture, the Aperture video wraps up by saying, look, if you understand that money is kind of this abstract, potentially shrinking thing, it makes you think about putting your resources into assets that might grow faster than inflation. It's like, don't just hoard cash. Think about how to make your value grow.
So the money in our wallets, it's all based on a kind of shared illusion. Now let's take a giant leap and imagine, what if money never existed in the first place?
This is where the whole thought experiment from the ChatGPT and What If video stuff really gets interesting. It's like reimagining the very fabric of society, right?
Like starting from scratch. ChatGPT suggests we might end up with a world built on trust and cooperation, where everyone's sharing resources and contributing based on what they're good at and what they actually enjoy doing. Sounds pretty idealistic, right?
Yeah, like a utopian vision. It's interesting to think about how our values might shift completely. Instead of competing for money, we might be focused on, like, who can offer the most valuable skills or who can solve the biggest problems.
And things like, food, housing, healthcare, education, maybe those would be available to everyone based on need, not on how much money they have. That's a radical change from how things work now.
For sure. And the idea of jobs maybe becoming more like roles, where you're doing something that aligns with your passion and technology's handling all the boring, repetitive stuff. That's pretty compelling too. Maybe it would be like a more fulfilling existence with less pressure from, just trying to make ends meet.
But then ChatGPT also brings up some pretty big roadblocks. Like, how do you measure the value of different contributions if there's no money? How do you keep people motivated and productive if they're not working for a paycheck? And the big one, how do you prevent people from taking advantage of others or hoarding resources if there's no system of exchange to keep things fair?
Exactly. It's like money, even with all its problems, does provide some kind of framework for like distributing resources and holding people accountable. Without it, how do you make sure things stay balanced and prevent, new forms of power from emerging?
And then we've got the What If channel, and their take is, well, it's a lot darker. They're picturing widespread looting, crime skyrocketing, essential services like police and healthcare just collapsing. It's basically anarchy, right?
Yeah, that's their scenario. It really makes you think about how money, even though it's flawed, does create some kind of order, It incentivizes people to provide those essential services. Take that away, and who knows what happens.
They even suggest that people who own guns might end up having a lot more power in that kind of world. You could have groups forming, fighting over whatever resources are left. Pretty grim, right?
It's definitely a cautionary tale. It shows you what could happen if you remove something as fundamental as money without having something equally powerful to replace it. They also talk about how barter might come back, but imagine trying to barter in today's world. We have so many specialized goods and services, it would be a nightmare.
Totally. Like you said, it's not just apples for oranges anymore. It's like you've got an organic, locally sourced apple, and I've got a, hand-knitted scarf. How do you even begin to compare those? And then what about counterfeit goods or saving for the future? It just gets so complex so fast.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But they do also explore some more optimistic possibilities, like maybe people would be less focused on material possessions, maybe there'd be less inequality if you can't just keep accumulating money.
Yeah.
And they even suggest people might be more willing to work for the common good if there's no profit motive.
Yeah, that's where the Curious Individuals Ask channel really dives in. They talk about how maybe your skills and your contributions to the community would become like the most important things, and that could lead to more equality overall. That's an interesting thought.
Yeah, like what do we value and who
Right.
do we respect, right? It wouldn't be about how much money you have, but what you can actually do for others.
And they also talk about how much less stress people might feel if they didn't have to worry about money all the time. You could be free to pursue your passions without constantly thinking about how to pay the bills. Sounds pretty tempting, but they do raise a good point. Would everyone just get lazy, or would it unleash a wave of creativity? People doing things just for the love of it.
That's the big question, right? Without that pressure, would we see this explosion of innovation, or would everyone just kind of chill out? It's hard to say.
And they get into some really interesting environmental implications too. Maybe we'd be way more sustainable, making things that last longer, sourcing stuff locally, and conserving resources,
Hmm.
without the constant pressure to produce and consume, consume, consume.
Yeah, it's like our whole relationship with the planet could shift.
Hmm.
But like they point out, the challenge of how to manage resources and make sure everyone has what they need, that wouldn't go away.
For sure. And when they talk about motivation, they highlight this thing called intrinsic motivation. Basically, it's the idea that humans actually want to contribute, that work itself can be meaningful and purposeful, not just a way to get a paycheck. It's a totally different way of thinking about work, right?
It challenges that whole idea that we need money to motivate people. Maybe we're actually more driven by a desire to be part of something bigger, to make a difference.
And they bring up the idea of redefining value, right? Focusing on things we actually need instead of all the stuff we're constantly told to want. But again, there's that practical challenge. How do you ensure fair distribution, prevent hoarding, and make sure no one gets too much power over essential resources? It's a tough one.
Yeah, it's like a constant balancing act. And then there's the whole technology angle. They talk about automation, AI, blockchain, all this stuff that could potentially create a more equitable world, but it could also make things even more unequal if it's not used carefully.
Definitely. Technology isn't a magic bullet. And last but not least, you sent us that fantastic clip from Alan Watts where he asks, what if money was no object?
Yeah, it's a great way to bring it back to a personal level. Like, what would you do if you didn't have to worry about money at all? What would really make you happy?
It's amazing how often people say they'd pursue some creative passion like painting, writing, music, whatever. They have these dreams they feel they can't really chase because they don't see how to make money from it.
And Watts really highlights that tendency, right?
Right.
We suppress our passions because we think we can't afford them.
Mm.
But he makes a really strong argument that doing what you love can actually lead to mastery, and then, ironically, the money might follow.
That point about a short life filled with things you enjoy versus a long life doing things you hate, that really hits home. It makes you question that whole grind, that idea that we have to work jobs we don't like just to pay for stuff we don't really need.
It's a powerful critique for sure. And then he talks about how we raise kids to follow in our footsteps, basically perpetuating this cycle of potential unhappiness. It really makes you think, what are we doing here?
So to sum it all up, we've gone from bartering to fiat currency and the historical roots of money to this whole mind-bending idea of a world without it. We've explored utopian visions, dystopian warnings, and everything in between. And we've even taken a moment to think about our own personal desires, what we might do if money wasn't holding us back.
A lot to digest, right?
Yeah.
From the system we rarely think about to imagining totally different ways of living, and then back to ourselves and what truly motivates us.
So, for our listeners, what sticks with you? Does seeing money as this kind of illusion change how you think about it? What parts of a moneyless world, both the good and the bad, seem the most likely or the most scary, or maybe even the most exciting?
There's a lot to ponder here, and there aren't any easy answers. But just engaging with these ideas can be super valuable.
Yeah, and maybe the real value in this whole exploration isn't about actually getting rid of money, but about understanding its power, its limitations, and, really figuring out what truly matters to us beyond those numbers in our bank accounts.
Food for thought, for sure.
Big time.